Oh, again, myself here, I grew up at Chippewa. Again, my father, Kingsley Riley, raised by my father and my grandmother, Mary. Uh, Went to school at Fanshawe College and moved to the city when I was about 22, 23. Met my wife while I was going to Fanshawe, and we've been together now 43 years. Again, 3 children, 12 grandchildren, 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. So that's a little bit about myself. Again, I always worked for Aboriginal organizations once I graduated from Fanshawe. Worked with the Friendship Center for almost 25 years. And one of the things I've always done, even growing up here at Chippewa, was community work. Again, my father was one that said we worked with the community to make things better. And so I helped out with Chippewa's very first powwow, over 40 years ago. And again, part of Chippewa Young People's Association, some 40 odd years ago, or over 40 years ago now. I'm just trying to think how old I am. And so it's community minded. So when I had the opportunity to sit on council and help from a political point of view, that's one thing that I agreed to. Again, I was asked by a community member if I'd run for council, still living in the city, and I agreed. You know, I sat on different boards within the city, different boards for Ontario, and actually nationally different boards. Again, all Aboriginal organizations. And so agreeing to sit on council and see what I could do to improve, I guess, the way our nation operates. And one of the things I did make change is that we have to start looking at all of our members, not just the ones that live on reserve, but all of them, no matter where they live. And I realized that by living in a city for 25 years, that there's some improvements that nations can make across the country, not only Chippewa. And so that's where I agreed to sit on the board, or I sit on council, and have been here ever since. I think part of it, we got to start looking at why we're in this situation. And I can understand that residential school was a part of that. And we got to start working on healing ourselves as opposed to using a substitute or a drug to deal with it. And so it's recognizing that we're in a community where there was a residential school, and the effects that they've had on our family and the effects that they have on the children, including myself. Again, my mother went to residential school. You know, I have uncles that went to residential school, cousins. And so growing up, I seen those people when they come home, or actually I think one of them ran away from residential school when I was very small and come home and got taken back. So I seen the effects of residential school. And it's starting to deal with that and how we are affected personally by residential school. And then the other part is living in poverty. I think residential school created a situation where most First Nations now live in poverty. And we start having to address that. And so recognizing that we can do better when it comes to economic development, we need to start looking at, and employment, creating employment for our members. So that's part of, I think, of the solution to dealing with the issue of drugs and alcohol, is just starting to look at a better life and recognizing that we can live a better life as opposed to doing these substance abuse issues. And so, again, we're looking at, for youth, learning their language, learning their culture, learning who they are, as opposed to what residential school or Canadian history has told them. And so I think that's the first step towards, or a better step towards, solving this alcohol and drug abuse issues, starting with the youth. And for now, with the adults, we have to do the same thing, but there are substance abuse facilities, I think, that we need to start looking at, and can we improve those facilities, including right here at Chippewa? Should there be one here, just to help with those abuses? Or one close by, living that, there's so many First Nations within southwestern Ontario. Well, growing up here, again, in Chippewa, and listening to my grandmother, and again, I'm aware that First Nations generally don't want to go to the doctors or to the hospitals. talking with my grandmother, she was afraid that if she went to the hospital, she'd never come home again. So we have to make our communities more comfortable with dealing with doctors and nurses. We have to allow the health community to be more aware of who we are as Aboriginal people, so that they're comfortable as well. And so it's kind of a two-way street between our community and the health community as well. And so when we start talking about transformation, it's how do we deal with Aboriginal people as opposed to what doctors and nurses may be trained at school on how to deal with people. Again, we have a different history than Canada does. And so there has to be a better understanding by the health community of that different history and dealing with us. And it's got to be more than just friendly and a smile. It's got to be, I know your history. I know we need to work on things. And don't be afraid to come in and talk to me. So that's the transformation that we're looking at, including right here within Chippewa. Again, we were all educated in post-secondary, in Western school, I guess, facilities. And so we all have that training on how to operate in the Western world. And we're just starting to look at how to operate within a First Nation world. And so that's what we're looking at is what does it mean to burn tobacco every morning? What does it mean to smudge and cleanse yourself? What are those natural medicines? And we're all starting to learn what those natural medicines are. In fact, to the point now where the Western world is starting to understand that our natural medicines also work for them as well. And so that's the transformation we're going through is how are we as Anishinaabe keeping up our health and living that good life, being Anishinaabe. And so that's, for me, that's the health transformation. Again, recognizing living that good life, those 7 stages of life, and growing up in a good way. So it's more than just medicine. That is always has been a difficult one when you start talking about community inclusion. And it's bringing up the different issues and the different ideas and getting the community involved. And sometimes, I'm told that you're a counselor, you deal with it. But we also need the community's input as well on different ideas and different issues. And so I know, historically we'd hold a meeting, community meeting, invite the community. But now I think we need to start using modern technology. I think the youth have taught us to move in that direction. Because the youth have instant communication. They're talking to one another and, instantly they know what's going on within the community or within their circles. And I think we can do the same as sitting on council and getting out the message to the community. We also have to help the community in getting that instant communication, getting that technology to find out what's going on, I guess a little sooner. Again, we still have the people that like to read the minutes, and we still have the minutes that are passed out. Again, but it's a lot quicker if we start using modern technology. And also getting the message out to the community members. Again, come on out and let's talk. Having that face-to-face dialogue is a lot better than sending the minutes out. And so we need to get back to that face-to-face dialogue, but also keep them informed through the minutes. Yeah, off reserve, again, I lived off the reserve for 25 years. And I think this is, sitting on council within the last couple of years, is the first time that council held a council meeting, an informative meeting within the City of London. When we were talking about one of the trusts, we did go to London, we went to Windsor, we went to Detroit, again, held information sessions. And so we're starting to recognize all of our members, not just on-reserve members, and getting them involved. And so, again, with the creation of a couple of the trusts, again, they're doing the same thing as well, talking with all of our members. And so, again, we did use some of the Aboriginal organizations within the City of London, one of them like the Friendship Centre, where we met there and invited members to come out. But we also need to be able to talk to the members that we know that live in an urban setting. And again, living in an urban setting, there's still members that I still talk to that still live in an urban setting. They may not have any interest of moving back home to the reserve, but they still interested on what are their benefits of being a Chippewa member. And so we have to continue down that road, is informing all of our members. Conflict of interest is when there's an issue that directly affects you, or payment directly affects you. And so if you're in conflict with an issue, that you should step aside or step back and let others take care of it, because you may not have an open mind on how to resolve it that would best work with the community. And so that's my understanding, is if it's something that where either you're going to get paid or you're directly involved. Governance, that's been one that's been really important to me when I first joined council for the last 22 years. And again, it's the way we operate, not only for the nation, but how we operate with other governments as well. And I was always concerned when I first joined council that our chief would be talking directly with a staff person from the federal government. And so making those changes in governments, our chief now talks with the ministers and deputy ministers and their senior politicians. And our senior staff talk with their senior staff. But it's understanding as who we are when it comes to governance. How do we operate with the community? How do we operate with the communities around us? And how do we do that in a good way? And so that people are informed and people have a voice into their governance. And so sitting on council, a lot of it comes down to discussions that we have one-on-one. And for years and years, I've always gone to public events and talked with a lot of people around their thoughts. What should we bring forward? How should the changes happen? You know, what are your interests on moving forward? And so when it comes to governance, it's keeping the community involved. And again, how do we do it from an Indigenous point of view as opposed to from the Indian Act? And it's not only stepping away from the Indian Act, but what are we replacing the Indian Act with when it comes to governance? And so that we have our own style of governance, First Nation governance. And for me, I talk about our clan system and what are responsibilities of a clan system. And so though we're just beginning those discussions with the community when it comes to governance. And again, stepping away from Canadian Indian Act governance. Thank you. Okay, we're coming up on an election, and the message I guess I would leave is that if we all get out and vote, and you look at the person that you think would best make a counselor, that would help best make decisions, that would speak up sitting at council. It may not necessarily be your best friend. And so, I'm hoping votes are based on who you think would speak up for the community, who you think, again, would think about the best decisions of the community. And overall, that everybody gets out and votes. I think the more people that vote, I think the better our council may be reflection of the community. And so I guess that would be the biggest message.